Well, welcome again to another episode of My Hope is Built On. And today I'm joined with another guest, Barbara LaPointe. And Barbara and I have, I've shared with the audience before that there's platforms out there where we can mutually connect with one another and reach out. And it's been kind of cool because I've been able to identify people that really, I think, will resonate with the audience. And so, Barbara, you're one of those people that I identified as someone who can really resonate with our audience today, especially as it relates to kind of where your background is and what your and the subject matter that you discuss. And I'm not going to go in and sharing all that. So, Barbara, why don't you go ahead and just tell everybody who you are, tell where you're from, and a little bit about what you do.
Absolutely, Dan. And I'm honored to be here. And thank you for the opportunity to step into Deeper Hope with you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I really set the intention before I tell you who I am, that we would have a powerful conversation around hope and that hope would support this conversation. And so.
No, I appreciate that.
I feel hopeful. So yes, I'm a solution-focused divorce coach for women. And I live in Alberta. And basically I support women but anyone who needs support through coaching. I also work in neurolinguistic programming and inherited family trauma, so where we can look at the whole system. And my practice is trauma-informed, which, it's a beautiful practice that supports women and children going through probably one of the most difficult transitions of their life, where they're challenged to find hope when they need it the most.
Yeah. So as it relates to trauma, then is it primarily around trauma related to divorce, or is it other areas of trauma as well?
It can be any trauma, divorce trauma or trauma related to emotional abuse. Okay. But a lot of times if we've had trauma as an adult, we can trace it back to earlier traumas in our life that were not resolved and that are still there asking to be healed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad you're on, and like I said, the show is all about hope. So the one question we always like to ask up front is, when you think of hope, what does hope mean to you?
It's not something I've really consciously given a lot of thought about. But ironically, I looked back and I did do a little talk recently where I created a video where I asked women to call on hope as a resource in their crisis, in their darkness, in their despair. And I really do believe that hope can support us and be a resource. But sometimes even I'm low on hope in my own life. And I feel zero shame in sharing that with you, because it's part of just being a human being.
Yeah.
At times where we don't have to really judge our hopelessness or, judge when we can't find hope. One thing I'm famous for is not answering questions directly. So you asked me what hope is. You can call me on that too, Dan. Hope is a resource. I thought about it and I was like, is hope a mindset? And I believe hope is a mindset. Is hope a muscle that we build? Hope is something that's invisible. But yet most of what happens in life, so much happens in the invisible realm, not the visible realm. So I really feel that hope is something that we can trust. And in fact, when I got your invitation, obviously I just quickly, as I always do, looked up what hope meant in the dictionary. And it's a feeling of expectation or desire for something to happen. And it also says it's a feeling of trust. So if we can get, as coaches, I would encourage someone to just tap into that trust, tap into that desire. But it's when we're going through something like divorce, trauma, pain, difficult transitions, that we have trouble tapping in to hope. So it's something invisible that's there to support us, and it's something that we can call on, but often sometimes we forget that we can, and we don't know how to do it. And without a doubt, it was a really relevant question that you posed. This podcast to me seems so relevant because in today's day and age, in this modern day, I feel intuitively that we need hope more than we've ever needed it before.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Definitely agree with you.
So
well, let me. Yeah,
sure.
no, and I appreciate your answers. Honestly, that hope is a resource. I hadn't heard that utilize that definition and used that way. And clearly, hope is a resource, right? Because if you have a dark period, or you're going through a traumatic time, or you're just at a place where things just don't seem right, we reach a period of what we, obviously the opposite of hope is hopelessness. And so we reach this place of hopelessness in our lives. And so when you think of that, then, and you see it as a resource, and how the follow-up question is, what is your hope built on? How would you answer that question? What is your hope built on then?
Right. That's such a powerful question. Hope, and the answer I came to for me is that hope is really doing the inner work so that hope can be activated and we can leverage it as a resource in whatever we're facing in our lives. So I guess that is never-ending work to build a foundation of hope. But that is really the important work that we have to do. Now, Dan, you mentioned emotions, and most people, I would imagine, are probably aware that as human beings, we have so many emotions, and there's that emotional guidance scale. All the emotions that we feel just being here on the planet. So there's a wonderful emotional scale. And, even if you know it, it's so interesting to tap into it and to look at it. So some of the highest frequency, most alive emotions we can feel are joy, empowerment, freedom, love, appreciation. And those keep us at a very high, hopeful place. Hope in itself is a preciously high vibrational state to be in. And we can create momentum to go up those scales of emotions where we can feel that hope is alive for us. So we want hope to be alive and very present. And so that would be my hope for anyone listening to the audience. And a question probably a coach would ask is like, how can we shift into getting more hope and alivening hope? And where does hope live in our body? And when we scale down, we get into lower frequency or emotions that are more painful to process, or maybe we feel less supported, and that would be hopelessness. But we don't arrive, I wouldn't say, at hopelessness, the antonym of hope, right away. Like we sort of scale down there we make our way down to despair and hopelessness through depression, anxiety, which so many of us struggle with depression and anxiety. And it might start off with boredom to some of the darker emotions of anger, revenge, and hatred. So it's like, where do we want to live on that scale? And how can we move up to more joyful, hopeful emotions?
Yeah, no, that's good. Well, when you navigate this, the emotion scale, and you're talking to somebody, how would you walk somebody through that? Especially, let's say, what is the most common thing that you find let's say with a divorce, someone who's gone through divorce? What are some of the most common emotions that you're having to deal with, and then helping them to shift to see that hope and find hope?
I feel like saying that probably in divorce, I see so much disappointment, anger, grief, sadness, lack of confidence, frustration. Yeah. insecurity, because we tend to lose our deep connection to our identity when we get divorced. But if we even open it up even wider, those can translate to any life transition where we just feel doubtful, worried, blame. Being in a state of fear is probably the lowest place that we can go. So are we going to live in our fear? I think the question is, do we want to live in our anger? And of course we don't. So what might we rather feel than living in our anger? So if you weren't hopelessness, how might you want to feel when you were facing divorce? And of course, I work often with high conflict divorces and abuse and high conflict personalities. So those are some pretty, a lot of emotions that come up, but we can extend the invitation to sit with those emotions, process them without judging them. And as we do that, we can start opening up our heart, or our personal field, or our energies, whatever languaging you want to use, it doesn't matter, so that we can begin to access a more hopeful mindset or spirit in whatever we're confronting. We're more empowered to confront it.
I do like how you talk about the spectrum or the scale, if you will, and because I do know, hopelessness isn't something that you just go from hope to hopeless. It's not this just drop. It's a gradual decline, and a lot of people call it rock bottom, right? You've hit rock bottom, and then that's almost to the point of where, now you're resorting to external sources that are harmful to you because you've got to a place of where it's just not good and it's not healthy in your life. And so, and have you seen people that have gone through that as well? And some of the trauma that they're just like, almost that level or that depth of hopelessness?
One of the truths about divorce with a high conflict personality or a narcissistic person, many women, the percentages are high. Like practically every woman I've interviewed for my book, and I interviewed 30 people over North America, and many of the women in my practice, you sort of end up, many women end up suicidal. Just bottomed out after experiencing narcissistic abuse or abuse of any kind. And that is a process over time. And yeah, it is rock bottom. And where do you go when you hit rock bottom, and how do you start moving up momentum to a better place? I listened to one of your podcasts. I really enjoyed it, by Kyle Webster.
Yes.
And he said that suffering was a prerequisite for hope. So on the same line, there's a lot of suffering that happens in divorce, in breakups, in abuse. But again, if suffering is a prerequisite for hope, it's just interesting how we learn and grow and evolve in love through these contrasts of hope and hopelessness, and suffering and hope.
Yeah.
Sadness and joy. If you're in the dark, you start to look for the light. And so it's through contrast that we can switch our momentum and shift in to more powerful emotional states. Because we have this beautiful emotional navigation system that we can use to convert things like hope, emotions like hope, into fuel for our soul. I think your question of how do you build a foundation of hope is a soulful question indeed.
So talk to me a little bit about the navigational system. I'd like to know a little bit more about that.
Well, it's just our emotions are constantly communicating to us what we need to heal. Where are we wounded? Where is our soul wounded? What emotions are activated? And if we can just become, through mindfulness or through coaching, a little more focused and aware of what are our emotions trying to communicate to us. We can start moving up the scale to more empowering emotions. So I think it's a deep practice, actually, of a practice of hope, because it never ever stops.
So basically you're saying that it's something that we need to continually do every day, and because we're constantly navigating our emotions, right? And so if that's the case, then we're constantly, the minute I see something in me that begins to slide in the wrong direction, I need to start to make some pivots in my life that really, and in my thinking, that will shift it into another direction.
Absolutely. And making those pivots, or asking questions that can shift you into a more empowered state of mind, or, because at the end of, I think the bottom line is we have to embody hope. We have to feel it in our bodies to really access it. So the good news of our life, and it is a very hopeful message, that we can actually change our brain chemistry, or the neuroplasticity of our brain, through coaching in as little as 6 weeks.
Yeah.
We don't have to be tied forever in our lives to hopelessness. In fact, we don't have to be tied down by our past traumas. We can overcome these things by doing the inner work and committing to a practice of hope building.
Yeah, that's interesting. I really like what you're saying there. The hope building aspects of it, and I do believe that. Obviously you've listened to us talk. If you listen to the show, and you know that I come from a position of faith, obviously, and so we look to basically Jesus is our hope, and that's what we're kind of foundationally built on, is that, because that's a great rock position for us as believers. But I don't necessarily say that that's the way everybody has to think. So that's why I invite lots of people on the show to talk from different perspectives. And the only reason we look at it from a foundational perspective, and I think you've hit this in what you're even saying, is that if it's not built on something solid, foundational, then there's a chance that you're gonna constantly slide. I use the analogy, you're like a ship that doesn't have an anchor. You drop the anchor, but there's no anchor on the end of it, and so it's just going to continue to move to and fro. But if it has something solid to hold it in place, then that hope is going to stay consistent, and you can then weather the storm better. You're going to still feel the bumps, and you're going to still feel the waves crashing and feel like it's overtaking you, but the boat's going to be stable in its positioning. And so what would your counter to that be from your perspective?
My counter would be that really resonated with me, because I was thinking that to just be patient with ourselves as we navigate our ship through the storm. We're learning to grow in love, and we're learning to put our anchor down, but we will sail our ships through the storm. And that's really what hope is. One thing I know for sure as Barbara is that we're not alone in this world. We truly are not alone. And so that's comforting.
Yeah.
And when we can feel that anchor, as you metaphorically described it, from a trauma perspective, we can feel more safe in this world. We can feel more rooted in security and safety, and then we can blossom where we're planted.
Yeah. And I love that you've said the other thing in there was that we're not alone in this world, and that's one of the things that we really share on this podcast as well, is that that's the whole purpose of it. You're not alone. Lots of people are going through different things, and how do they navigate life and go through those things and to find their hope, or maybe how they came through a situation onto the other side and was able to get there. But one of the things it said there is that there is a sense of community that's needed. And so one of the things I always say to somebody is that, hey, listen, if you're at a place of not having any hope in your life, then I want you to borrow my hope right now. And so I'm pouring into their lives now, giving them the hope that I have and hoping that they will begin to see hope in their own life. And so there's that sense of community that has to happen as we begin to navigate life. And I think one of the challenges I've always found, I've actually done, because I worked in the church, I've done divorce counseling and different things of that nature. And what's always a little bit of a problem I've always seen is that they've always come to me when it's too late, right? And so they're like, hey, can you help us? But it's like, no, you've already decided you're going to do this. You're not asking for help. It's too late. And you know, they want reconciliation, or they want to make it work, or any of those things. And but like I said, they've already, in their minds, they've mentally decided that it's over, and they just want you to affirm it, and then they can move on with it. And but my question to you is this: if we would begin to open up a little bit more in our conversation, and allow ourselves to be vulnerable with people, and not wait so long as we're having these thoughts in our mind, you know, or I'm in an abusive situation. How long am I going to stick in this abuse? Am I letting anybody else know that I'm going through this abusive situation? You know, it would help that person so much more so along the path.
So true. It actually amazes me how much support women need in divorce, just to reach out for help or reach out to receive support. So that really struck me. And often, as you were saying, in divorce, we feel alone. Women feel alone, like they're the only ones.
Yeah.
So we heal in community, and you mentioned community, and we can reach our goals and set more powerful intentions when we're in our community. And divorce and abuse isolate and divide us. So emotional support is so important. The other point that I'd speak to is to become alive with joy, is maybe to remember, of course, it's hard not to talk about hope without actually referencing the Bible. And I did. So, you know, one thing the Bible says is, and I've never quoted the Bible on a show, but God does say that he wants to fill us with hope and joy and peace that overflows, that our hope is overflowing. So, I mean, it's quite exciting to think that we don't have to grasp onto a little bit of hope, but that we can have abundant hope. Yeah.
That's so true. And that's exactly what this show's about. You know, I want people to find hope, you know, like you said. And there is hope.
It's such a beautiful subject, because then we can receive a miracle.
Yeah.
We can receive God's support. We can use hope as a resource and so it's such a beautiful thing to really dive deep into.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I really enjoyed our conversation today. Honestly, I think this has been really cool. I was going to ask you though, why don't you share with some people, talk to us a little bit more about your book and maybe some other things that you've done, because I'd like the audience to at least know about that.
Absolutely. Well, I have a small complimentary ebook called Erased by a Narcissist, and it just outlines my journey dealing with a high conflict personality through divorce. And so that's available on my website, barbaralapointe.com. And I also created a beautiful meditation for anyone going through separation or painful divorce that I'd love to gift to your audience with a code that you can put in the show notes.
Okay.
And just sometimes meditating or just slowing down helps us to become more mindful.
Yeah, no, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I definitely will put all the information in the show notes so that the audience has a chance to check out your website and also take advantage of your offer there. And I think that's amazing. And I appreciate that. Just from a personal journey, because you did talk that you did personally, do you still now have to work on yourself, even as it relates to what you went through personally?
I'm so much more today sitting in the place of a healed story.
Good.
Yeah, I do. But I still, for sure, because I co-parent with someone, have my days where they're more difficult, more emotionally challenging, or triggered or activated emotions come up. that I have to move through, process, and resolve. And it's so much, back to community, it's so much more supportive to do that with someone with you by your side, than on your own.
And another, just in regards to all what you just said, is the processing part. When processing our emotions, how long does that really take? Because, everybody wants a quick fix, right?
Yeah, we want to feel better right away. We want to feel right now. And I actually remember posing that question to someone, like, how long do I have to cry? To get rid of the rage and anger and fear. Fear is such a gripping emotion in divorce. And it's, again, at the lowest level of that emotional scale we keep talking about. And the short and long answer is as long as it takes, but just to keep confronting and processing those emotions that need to be released, that are really there to serve us, so that we can emotionally decharge the wounds of divorce.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, like I said, when you hear it, I know that I'm thinking to myself, well, how long do I have to process? I want this over.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of comes back to coaching, because it's like, sometimes it's just little steps.
Yep.
Making a bridge, creating a bridge, but it's those little steps that create the momentum for positive transformation and positive change to shape the invisible parts of our life.
No, that's really good. Well, Barbara, once again, I really appreciate you joining us today. And I'm going to make sure our audience gets access to all your information through our show notes. If anybody's listening right now and would love to stay tuned, Barbara, you want to say anything in closing to everybody?
Absolutely. I invite you to reach out to me anytime at barbara@barbaralapointe.com. Definitely download my free ebook, Erased by a Narcissist, which is full of all kinds of tips to help you combat a difficult or conflict-oriented person. And I have a little poem to finish with related to our valued topic of hope today.
Oh, that'd be great. Let's hear it.
Okay, so this is by Emily Dickinson, and she just says, hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. So I think at the end she's saying hope asks us for nothing. It asks nothing of us, but it is there. It is there for us to support us.
Yeah. And
not
expecting anything in return. That's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you again for everything. And we really appreciate you being on the show today. And for those of you that are listening, until the next time we meet, stay faithful, stay hopeful.